Our next speaker is Mark Finzer, who is a friend of Henry's through the philanthropic world and is a part of RSF Social Finance, and we're really lucky to have him with us today. Mark, please come on up. Thank you.
Well, there's so much that has already been said, and I was trying to think what is there to add, and I was reminded of the time I first met Henry, which was Rudolf Steiner Foundation, which is now known as RSF Social Finance, was invited by the San Francisco Waldorf School to come back in the 80s. And that's when I first saw Henry, and he was walking down the street, and he was carrying this very large-looking purse. And coming from New York, I thought, only in San Francisco. It turns out, of course, it's again one of those gadgets. It was one of those satellite phones, those huge phones back in the 1980s that he carried around with him. And the San Francisco Waldorf School, as you heard already today, wouldn't be there if it wasn't for Virgilia and Henry Dakin. That school is... That school, as you know, Waldorf Education is inspired and was co-founded by Rudolf Steiner, and this is a school, the San Francisco Waldorf School, that really not only pioneered education here in San Francisco with Waldorf Education, but really is a leader throughout the world because of its core principles that it has stood with out of Rudolf Steiner's ideals. So many of the ideals that all of us here in this room carry and that are imbued right down into the education. And that school really is a leader in that regard, and for that we can be extremely grateful for this school and for the leadership it plays throughout the world. And for us at RSF Social Finance, it's also been a joy to work with that school over these many years, whether it was in financing projects, etc. And for me, I think the really profound experience was also when we moved RSF out to California, now 12 years ago. And of course, who would be there to sort of welcome us, not only as a family, but as an organization? Again, Virgilia and Henry. And again, Henry in such a quiet way, just helping pave the way and helping us also with our home here, actually in the Presidio, and the many meetings that we had in those early years as we got established here on the West Coast, which was a big undertaking coming from New York. And so I think as I look out over this room and I think of all the choreography that we all represent in Henry's life, and I think if we could only sort of take ourselves way up, way up, and look down at all the threads that have brought us here together, and then realize that from where each of us stand, we only see a tiny portion of what really is at play. And I got, again, convinced this afternoon when experiencing and also meeting all of you and reconnecting that this is really what Henry's life was all about. It was really about that tapestry and about that selfless connecting and the selfless just work in so many ways that has already been said, but it's for us at RSF, it was also incredibly invisible as well. But for us also as a family, some of you know my wife, Heidi Finzer, as a eurythmist, and one of the last things that he did before he moved from Mill Valley, the short time that they were in Mill Valley, Virgilia had taken wonderful walks with Heidi and heard her poems just around the time that she was diagnosed with dementia. And Henry, as Henry does, he right away took these 21 poems that she had sort of downloaded in an incredible way. They're more like teachings of her whole life work, what she wanted to leave behind. And what does Henry do? You can all guess it. He typesets it, he collates it, and he puts it all into a little book that she then was able to share and to read as long as she could still read. So for me, that epitomizes Henry, as you have heard in so many ways today. So for that, I'm grateful. And even though my wife is not here today, because it would have been too long a ceremony for her, she certainly joins me here in spirit. So I thank you, and I also thank you, Henry, and our loving thoughts really stream out to you as you are on your next journey and as you are, in many ways, part of all of our fabric. Thank you.
And now we have the pleasure of an a cappella contribution from what you've just heard about, one of the Dakin family's really greatest projects, the San Francisco Waldorf School faculty. One of the interesting things about people in public life is that their families have to share them with the rest of the world. And what's so interesting about Henry's family and Henry's life is he was a private person in public life who was really private. So it's a very unusual combination. And yet, even though his public persona was something that many of us knew and was written about in newspaper articles, it wasn't the usual thing, because usually the public personas you see out front, and as you've heard all evening, that Henry was out front while staying in the shadows, behind, kind of making everything work. And that was really remarkable. And yet we all know, and we all owe a debt of gratitude to all those hours that he was out there with doing all the things that people out in the world have been talking about. What you've heard from Adriana, and now you'll hear from Sue, Dakin is how it looked from the family side. And that we owe them all a tremendous debt of gratitude for sharing Henry's time with us. And also we are really blessed to have them here to tell the rest of us about what it was like to be in the same family and to really be in a unit that went beyond the walls of what many of us saw. So without further ado, our final formal speaker, and then we'll have a chance for the rest of you to share your thoughts and memories. Please welcome Henry's dear sister, Susanna Dakin.
What do you think of it, little brother? I think one of the things that probably assures that Henry is here with us right now is that finally, now that he's mastered the art of invisibility, he can be present and still at the same time, none of us can be absolutely sure. And I think an awful lot of what I wanted to say has already been said, so I have to say ditto, ditto, and most especially ditto, ditto. But anyway, when we were, I guess I'm one of the people who's known him longest, since he arrived in our family when I was about 4.5. I don't remember that day, but what I do remember is that very soon most of the grown-ups started remarking on what a little angel he was. And I think I got a little jealous. and I worked up some steam with this jealousy for a while. I mean, this is the only way I can explain it, because one time when he was about 2 or so, and I was somewhere between 6 and 7, I threw a toy train at him and broke his tooth. And I was so appalled at this pain that I'd caused with this innocent little boy, who was his only sin really was, here he was in the 2s, and he just wasn't being terrible enough, you know? And so anyway, I tried to make up for my terrible thing I'd done by taking him under my wing and teaching him everything I imagined I knew. He told me many years into his adulthood how angry he was when he was in college and he discovered some of the things that I had taught him, I had invented. But anyway, he outdid me in various esoteric ways of gathering knowledge. As you heard from Adriana, he had a family of very close friends. The father ghost, his name was Killer. The mother's name was Capture, and the son, who was, as ghosts go, about equivalent to Henry's age, was named Killer, Capture, and Catcher. And they took Henry on all sorts of wonderful adventures. I mean, he was learning things all over the place from these wonderful friends of his. Well, one night when he was about 5, some of you have to forgive me, you've heard this story before, but Mother and Dad took our older brother Roger and me to a movie, and Henry, who just had a fit because he wanted to go to that movie. And anyway, so we went to the movie. We got home, went to bed, got up for breakfast the next morning. At breakfast, Henry, in a quite sophisticated 5-year-old way, told us the plot of the movie. And we kind of sat around in astonishment, and at first all of us thought Roger had told him, but Roger seemed to be just as astonished as the rest of it. So Henry finally told us that Killer had a magic rug, and he felt sorry for Henry and, you know, being unfairly shut out of the movie. So he took Henry on his magic rug to the movie theater, and they parked near the ceiling somewhere. And Henry said he looked down at us, and he would have waved if we'd looked up, but we didn't. So I think at various points, one or another of us tried to figure out what the real answer was. We don't know. The mystery was never cleared up. And maybe it's not a mystery. Maybe it's just a killer on the magic rug. But anyway, as far as I can see, his friends were great teachers. They helped Henry to develop this kind of infinitely extendable curiosity that he had about absolutely everything. I think they encouraged him to walk on tiptoes everywhere he went, so that he could see over or around the barriers that people put up to learning things. Anyway, these skills served him very well in many arenas, including investigation into the paranormal. I once said something to him about people being either too ready to believe everything they hear about paranormal phenomena, or on the other hand, overly skeptical, not wanting to exercise their curiosity. And he agreed with me. And he said that he'd kind of come to the conclusion that about 99% of so-called paranormal phenomena are either explainable by some esoteric, complicated, but nevertheless verifiable science, I guess, or they're outright fraud, but that he felt that 1% was what was most worth investigating. And I always admired and loved him for that. But anyway, he did say that the instrumentation was not fine enough to properly test paranormal phenomena. They're getting more sensitive. They have gotten more sensitive in the last few decades, but probably not enough to keep Angel Henry under surveillance anymore. I suspect we will have to rely on our own extra senses in order to know he's still around, at least some of the time. But for those of us here today who are not quite angels yet, I think there are plenty who are. I acknowledge you. But I think Henry taught me the essentials of how you become an angel. And let's see. The first requirement is that limitless curiosity. The second is a willingness to speak with ghosts. And a third is knowing that the only real purpose of money, the only good use for money, is to put it to good use. And I think Henry put it to very good use. The last thing I wanted to say is I miss Henry very much in flesh and blood, but I think he's going to be around for a long time. And I think one of the esoteric skills he is probably mastered at this point is the one where you can be many places at once, including at the farthest reaches of the universe and right here at the same time. So, thank you, Henry.
Thank you, Sue. I think I've repeated that story about the ghosts in the movie hundreds of times. It's my favorite Henry story.